Mr. Council President. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I just want to address what the real core question before us is. Have we achieved clear financial service benchmarks that justify taking less than a full 2.5% increase? And I'll take us back a little bit. And the reason why I bring up benchmarks, engineer of 30 years, I live my life around benchmarks and variations and what happened historically. So I just want to talk about the town was in a financial free fall just a few short years ago. And many of us, some of us here even participated in some of those brutal finance committee meetings where every single budget was a battle, and not just to avoid cuts, but to prevent outright closures. I mean, some of this was pretty bad. Mr. Council President, you were there yourself, you remember this. But in 2018, the residents went to the ballot box and made a really difficult but necessary choice to commit to long-term financial stability, better managed services, and responsible growth. And from what I've seen, that vision's working. But let's be really clear. This process is not by accident. Our professional management team has improved efficiency and delivered positive financial audits. We've received a raise in our credit rating with the highest level now within reach. Just a few years ago, we couldn't have dreamed about that. That's essentially an achievement that would save taxpayers millions in lower borrowing costs. We've strengthened our stabilization reserves, which, if you think about it, protects our community's financial investments. All the taxes we pay, okay, that's just not just an ethereal thing. That's an investment in our own lives, in our families' lives, in the community around us, our neighbors, our friends. But we're still really early in this process. The real benefits of responsible financial management are only going to be fully realized if we stay committed to the plan that got us there. We're not even close to realizing what North Attleboro could be. And so when I think about some of these benchmarks, what are some of those benchmarks? Have we achieved that highest possible credit rating that we could possibly get? That's a milestone that will again, reduce borrowing costs, not just for today, but for decades to come. It'll benefit everything from public safety investments to infrastructure projects. And taking the full levy is a key factor in reaching that goal. I mean, seriously, has anyone here just weighed what a small one-time rebate against the potential savings of a top-tier credit rating would provide every taxpayer? I'm going to tell you, it's a lot more than $100. A rebate is absolutely nothing compared to the long-term savings that will come with a top-tier credit rating. That is true tax relief. Benchmark 2, are we gaining ground on OPEB and long-term obligations? Pension and retiree health care obligations, they don't just disappear. If they're not strategically managed, they will become a financial crisis. And honestly, I don't care what any other town around us is doing. I care what's happening right here. So regardless of what anyone else is doing, I would just ask, is North Attleboro above and beyond our expectation of OPEB contribution, or are we just keeping pace? If we can't say that we're well ahead of that liability, then reducing tax revenue right now is completely reckless. Are we fully prepared for collective bargaining contracts? We have, as a town, already experienced what happens when poor financial situations impact public safety. There's shortages in staffing, there's increased response times, and all of that adds up to a direct risk to our fellow residents. These are services we all rely on. Are we saying that for a small rebate, we're willing to repeat that awful situation? Have we adequately reserved funds to pay our employees competitive, sustainable contracts that reflect, in some cases, life and death service? Another benchmark. Do our stabilization reserves meet minimum benchmarks that are agreed upon by the town manager, by the council, and what makes sense fiscally with our independent auditors, and just common sense? Having reserves, it's not enough. The real question is, are we prepared for that next emergency? We heard about snow and ice this evening. We know from past experience that one bad winter month can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in plowing, overtime, infrastructure repairs, public safety, folks to be on the streets. If we haven't met our financial benchmark for reserves, how can we possibly justify reducing any revenues? Some other benchmarks that I would consider are infrastructure. I won't get into what was been discussed this evening, but have we secured resources for a new central firehouse? It's a century-old building, and one that we all rely on the service that comes out of there. We already know that the angled driveway has physically damaged our costly fire trucks. It's shortened their lifespan. It's driven up their maintenance cost. The interior, if you've walked through there, is outdated, and it fails to meet some of our modern fire service needs for those who protect our community. Do we have financial reserves specifically to cushion this need when the taxpayers are asked to pass yet another debt exclusion? So these are just a few of the benchmarks. I could continue and continue, but where I'm leading to is we need to be a town that plays from strength. We know and have lived scarcity. We've been there. It's an awful, awful dark place. And every budget season was a desperate negotiation of what would survive instead of constructive discussions on how we were going to thrive. Okay? Those sessions were toxic, and they were horribly divisive to the whole community. This can't be who we are today. We need to play from strength. We have to move from that mindset of scarcity to sustainability, resilience, and a long-term fiscal security. And so that gets into why I'm really deeply concerned about this particular approach. It kind of comes under the guise of tax relief, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And I'm glad that it was touched upon. But let's be really, really clear. Holding back part of the levy this year does not mean taxpayers will never pay that amount. It can and will be added to our levy in future years. And the only way to produce real tax relief is to take the honest route and put an underride question on the ballot and let the voters decide. Anything else, at its very worst, is a game that we've seen before, and that's called political manipulation. We cannot have any type of misleading representation of what many people outside of this room, outside of government, would construe as permanent tax relief, because it is not. So how about, instead of engaging in any type of misleading political games and foolishness, we have been there, we've seen it, it's been awful, and we have come out of that. The question we should really be asking is, how do we strengthen our town and provide responsible tax relief? And if tax relief is the goal, fine. Let's see a real discussion about rebates within the services that don't jeopardize our credit rating or our long-term financial stability. And I'm just going to add, as to all the counselors here, as someone that's formerly been in your position and even prior to that through some really, really rough times, if you want to build trust in this community for all of your important asks that you're going to have, I'm just going to tell you this: you're never going to shake hands and come to compromise with clenched fists. Okay? This is a time for thoughtfulness, compromise, truth-telling, the complete absence of egos, and some real leadership, okay? And before we can even consider reducing the levy increase, let's first be sure that we've met all the financial benchmarks that guarantee North Attleboro will never, ever again be in a position of financial desperation, because what the path that we've set forward is really the only true responsible path that we have in front of us. I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.